welcome to this episode of XI Café. This is the Experience Improvement Podcast, proudly brought to you by InMoment. My name's Scott Hobson. Hey Desmond, my name is Scott. I'm one of the sales directors here at InMoment. Today we're joined by a very keen Desmond Strydom, joining us all the way from beautiful Ballarat, one of my favourite towns in Victoria. Desmond is the Customer Experience Manager from Victoria's State Revenue Office. Right. Desmond's going to chat to us a little bit today about his journey with the VoC, or Voice of Customer program, a few topics around gaining support from the leadership team, some of the early success the team's had, and share a few stories around that. So Desmond, a massive hello and welcome, and thank you for joining us.
Hi, thank you, Scott. Yeah, happy to be here and talk about what we've been doing. And yeah, obviously InMoment's been a big part of that, getting some of our projects off the ground.
Yeah, awesome. Well, why don't we start there? Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and in particular your role there at SRO, or State Revenue Office?
Yeah, so I've been at the State Revenue Office now for about 2.5 years. You know, customer experience, not normally something you would associate with an office that collects taxes and collects revenue, but actually the State Revenue Office had the start of a customer experience department even before I started, being run in our corporate communications department. And I think it came to a certain point where, you know, the leaders of the organization realized that I needed to invest really heavily in it. So was really happy to join. My background was in customer service in the UK and here in Victoria. So, you know, customer service and customer experience a natural fit together. Yeah, we've just been building on what we already had since then, and it's moving really rapidly.
Right. So tell me, Desmond, when did you start with SRO there in Victoria?
Yeah, so late 2020, in October 2020, here in Ballarat. So yep. The State Revenue Office has an office here in Ballarat and an office in Melbourne. And yeah, I realized this is where the action was. So yeah, moved from Melbourne to be here in Ballarat to start this job.
Nice. And started in the thick of COVID. Always interesting, always a good challenge.
Yeah, well, you know, that was an experience itself, because I applied to work with the State Revenue Office, interviewed, met all the stakeholders, and then worked the first 4 or 6 months without actually meeting anyone face to face. So yeah, so unusual. So my career here very much started in the spare room, I think.
Yeah.
But thank goodness, yeah, we're all together now, which is good.
Yeah, you're not alone. There's a whole cohort of COVID starters. Would you tell us a little bit about the structure of your team there within SRO and how it operates?
Yeah, so the customer experience at the State Revenue Office has its own department, its own branch, and we so there are 3 of us working in customer experience at the moment, and we, you know, our skill set really ranges from seeking out customer feedback, the strategy around customer experience and how to implement it. And then the third kind of thing that we really specialize in is actually the doing part, you know, because the main point about seeking out customer feedback and turning it into information that any organization can use, the real value is in actually using it to make changes. So the 3 of us concentrate on those parts. And more broadly at the State Revenue Office, we closely linked to the strategic teams. So, you know, as most government organizations do, we've got a clear and also a publicly communicated strategy and a plan. You'll have seen the 3-year plans that the Treasury and the State Revenue Office publish. Yeah. One of those for us is to make things easier for our customers. So we've always worked really closely with the strategic teams.
Yeah, nice. You mentioned the 3 focus areas around collecting feedback and defining strategy or executing on strategy. which comes first? Is the feedback designed to align to the strategy? Are you using the feedback to define the strategy, or is it a combination?
It's a cycle, right? So it's like the old chicken and the egg. Actually,
That's
there
it.
is, no one thing comes first. The way it works here is it's a process that goes round, a continuous feedback process,
Yep.
Now, getting customer feedback, and some of the systems used to do it, like in Moment, provide the voice of the customer dashboard. These are relatively new. So in many cases, an organization will have an objective or a strategy first. And then once you start to invest in customer feedback, then the cycle begins, So once it's working, and I think at the start, you do have to figure out how to kick off from a strategy that exists already.
Of course.
And as a public entity, a lot of that is about the responsibility we have to our community, So when you start, you have to figure out how you work within that strategy. But after some time, and look, cultural change, we're talking more in the 5-year cycle. After some time, you can begin to use customer feedback to actually influence the strategy. So that's when you have that continuous loop going, get feedback from customers, understand your business objectives. What are you able to do? Feed that to your executives so that they're able to put together a customer-led strategy.
Beautiful. That sounds good. If we dive into objective, what are the objectives of the VoC program there at SRO? I can't fit many more acronyms in than that. What's the goal of the program? What's it there to do?
Yeah, look, at the very highest level, we are clearly linked to our goal of making it easier for customers to understand and fulfill their liabilities. Mm-hmm. So, the State Revenue Office, we work on collecting revenue, which is then fed back into the community in the form of services. So our main aim, and when I started the State Revenue Office, is how can we actually bring that goal, that objective of making it easier for people, how can we bring that to life? That's a broader view. Internally, which is as important as what you kind of say externally, how can you create a culture in the organization, or how can you build on some of the good qualities we already have? And a part of that is about introducing customer feedback at all levels. So you can assist, I'm here at Ballarat. I sit very close to our amazing customer service branch. So how can you get customer feedback through to people on the phone? I'm talking, trends about high level themes that you see from customers. How do you get that information through to someone taking calls, or a team leader that manages 10 people taking calls, or a technical officer who deals with one of the more complex revenue lines? So along with us, we're being in service to the community and our customers to understand their taxes, it's also equally important to have the objective of making customer feedback available to people working inside the State Revenue Office too.
Yeah, great. That sounds good. With I guess understanding that vision and the goal for the program, when you started, let's call it 2.5 years ago, thereabouts, how was the journey on getting adoption from the leadership team or decision makers within SRO to invest into a program? Because it's a couple of things, right? It's people's time, it's aligning to strategy, it's sort of committing to the path of a platform and introducing listening posts. And like you've recognized, if you're capturing feedback, you need to action it, you need to make changes. Can you tell us a little bit about the journey on bringing the business along and the organization along with you?
Yeah, and look, the advantage I always had starting at the State Revenue Office is that our leadership team are always really engaged and had a really progressive mindset about seeking customer feedback. And it was, that was a good place to start, but it gained extra importance during a few events here in Victoria. First of all, the terrible bushfires we had, which had a huge impact on our community, and then the pandemic, which quickly followed. So what that meant is that an organization like the State Revenue Office was administering all those revenue lines, but also providing relief to communities in the form of grants and certain concessions. And what that meant was that really quickly, we needed a direct line into the people we were serving, because I think a lot of businesses were put in a position that they needed to move really quickly. They needed to perhaps change the way they worked. So it was a really unique time to begin, and the executive were always bought into the idea. And of course, some of that was due to necessity.
Yeah.
What was kind of important to understand about procuring a service in the public sector is that it's public money, so there's a big responsibility to provide value for the money that we spend.
Yeah.
So right at the start, dealing with the executive, really important to understand what those clear objectives were, what the outcomes for putting a customer experience plan in place was, and what the timelines involved were. It's always the timelines that kind of can come as a surprise. I spoke about cultural change being in the customer experience space, being a 5-year journey, which is really hard to get your head around, because it sounds like ages, So what was essential at the start is the organization that we partnered with actually came to speak to each of the leadership teams separately, understand as a group, and understand what their objectives and what they wanted to achieve was. And that was right at the beginning of our journey. So, as with all change that you're trying to put in place, we kept the people involved each step of the way. And that made it the preceding, or the 2 years that followed, a lot smoother.
Yeah.
But just the last thing I'll say is that when introducing executives or any organization to customer experience in particular, what was most important is just to get rid of some of the jargon, get rid of some of the mystic part about it. CX, I think, can come across as fluffy sometimes. It's no surprise to anyone. What does it actually mean? What is it actually going to do? I think surveying in particular gets a pretty bad rap. It has a bad reputation. And so for our executive, get rid of all the kind of jargon, start to explain how customer feedback can actually be used to make a change. And that made a big difference.
Yeah, that's right. That's good. Look, I won't take offense to the survey comment, and we'll substitute the word survey with the word signals, which I think is far more telling for the direction of CX and voice of customer. It's all about signals you can get from your customers, solicited and as you guys are doing. The engagement with executives and understanding what they're looking for from a program. Did that help define a success criteria for you? That may well still be ongoing, a couple of years to run, perhaps, if it aligns to 5 years.
That's
Did
right.
that come from the executive?
It did.
Yep.
It did. So, it helped myself and our partners. And I know you work with Kiri. Kiri was with us in Melbourne doing this work. It helped us really define from the executive point of view who are the most experienced people in our organization, in understanding where we sit in the broader context. Really helped us understand what they wanted to achieve. And here's the important part for the State Revenue Office, what that comfortable pace of progress looks like.
Yep.
Each organization is different. Some move a lot faster. In a space like ours where we're collecting revenue or we deal with compliance and legislation, that pace is a little slower, because of the responsibility involved. So having those discussions really early on helped us understand that. And what it means is we can plan the program appropriately, and then there are far fewer roadblocks later on. So it was very worthwhile.
That's great. A term I've heard used before is progress over perfection. It may have been you who said that, but
No.
is that a good example of sort of managing internal expectation around program outcomes? Is let's move forward. Let's not worry about getting to absolute best practice, bulletproof program too soon. As long as we're
Yeah, look,
advancing.
and that concept, progress over perfection, is something that is woven through the program at all levels, because the natural tendency is to aim for the ideal, right? Especially when it comes, so later on in the process, you've got customer feedback, you've decided on something you want to do, you then in project land and managing those projects. And it is really easy to set this ideal goal that takes years to get to, or takes a long time to get to, and you either don't make it or you get to where you're going and the goalposts have changed. So that shift in thinking is a really essential part of the entire program and what the outcomes are. And it's something you constantly have to drag people and ideas back towards. What can we do right now to make a difference on the path to where we're going? Very difficult, very easy to talk about, but in practice, it can sometimes feel like you're undershooting, But yeah, this idea of iteration is something that takes a lot of practice, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of the program as it exists today, can you share with the audience some examples of how you're actually using the data, collected the feedback to drive some changes?
Yeah, so our the kind of jewel in our program at the moment, and we're very new. We've only been running it for a year.
Yep.
Oh, less than a year actually. We launched our first survey in May, and that was
Okay.
a contact center survey. So after someone calls us, we send them a survey invite by email in the 2 or 3 days that follow, and ask them for their experience. Our customers have just exceeded our expectations in engaging with this survey. We have a fantastic response rate of over 15% of customers who respond to that survey, and it's a longer form survey, so they're really investing their time. Feedback from that one survey has really been spread across the whole organization. So, if you think about our business as managing a collection of taxes, for instance, revenue lines, we use that feedback and split it up and actually go and communicate it with those teams. So a really great example of changes being made there, which might be easy to relate to, is feedback about the portals. All these portals that we use, we have them also at the State Revenue Office. We've got 2 amazing ones. We've got a land tax portal where people can log in, and a payroll tax portal, amongst others. And we've used feedback from people who are calling to actually make changes to the way our portals work and carry that journey on. So very practical, very change that can be made in a short period of time, and has a big impact for our customers. Smaller changes may seem small, but you're able to make more of them in a short period of time, and actually can have quite a big impact for customers in the end.
Yeah, nice. That's great. And driving change off the back of customer feedback, very customer centric of you naturally. Is there a process within SRO where you, I guess, sort of aggregate all the feedback you're collecting, view it through a different lens at SRO to prioritize what areas you want to invest into change, if it's portal changes, if it's procedural changes, if it's contact center objective changes? Does something happen internally that allows you to prioritize next actions?
Yeah. So it depends on how big the change you want to make is. But if we take a step back in voice of the customer, what you're doing as a part of your job as a CX team is the analysis and reporting. That's a really essential step, right? So it's at that point where you're quickly able to gauge what gets done now, what needs more consideration, what needs maybe consideration and investment. So just as we've started to get our head around this, we produce a really detailed report, for example, every quarter for our executive, talking a bit about the higher level things, but being able to dig into it. Generally, that's focused on larger changes that the executive can get together and discuss and to think about how it fits into their plan. At a more local level, here in Ballarat, for instance, we produce customer feedback reports every month for the revenue lines, and this is for the branch manager and frontline teams. So those tend to be more focused on smaller local changes. Yeah. And so we have a great flat structure here at the State Revenue Office, which means you can present customer feedback and get buy-in for making change really quickly. But it's at those quarterly reports that you present your executive where you can, and our executive are really open to it, you can pitch for bigger ideas. And I think that's important. Maybe that's why we've been a bit more successful here, is because our executive of the State Revenue Office have put a lot of trust and faith in our analysis, and they've given us space to have ideas, which is awesome, because the analysis and the idea creation goes hand in hand, So that's been a really key part. That's how we communicating it at the moment. The only caveat there, maybe not caveat, but something that I've increasingly realized is that organizations have a capacity for change over time. And it's very easy as a researcher and an analyst to exceed that, pump out a lot of research and a lot of customer feedback. So that's something always have to be mindful of, because it's really easy to fatigue your stakeholders with continuous research. And that's where stepping into the doing space can really change people's perception of customer experience, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. You talk about, and congratulations on maintaining trust with the executive team off the back of the program, which is naturally really important. Do you find the robustness of your survey program, maybe the high response rate you've spoken about, 15% from one channel, do you think that's helping? Are you getting a high volume of feedback from customers that help and validate the interpretation of the analytics that you put forward, because you're hearing from a good portion of the population there in Victoria?
That's right. Yeah. So that's been a really important part of, as you say, validating what we're hearing. At the moment, we've got a program that is at the top of our peers. We survey more people than other revenue offices. We go deeper into the business than other revenue offices. And that's been a key part of, when you're starting out, put your weight into making the surveys as successful and as wide-reaching as possible, so that you're presented with this wealth of information. And what it actually means is, apart from, when I'm presenting to people or speaking to you, for instance, I can say, well, this is 5,000 customers, this has a lot of weight behind it. What it also means is that you're able to dissect the information into smaller portions to ask specific questions, which is where the contact center is just, it's just been so amazing, because you have access to everyone calling about all these different issues, and we just survey you. How did it go? What did you call about? What it means later on is that we're able to segment customers into what they're doing, or perhaps the services they use, and you're able to interrogate those segments really closely. So that's been a huge advantage. Now, it's, as the program progresses, we'll actually narrow the focus so that we survey customers of a specific revenue line, perhaps, or at a certain time, or people who use the website. But as a starting off point, the contact center has been, it's really exceeded our expectations.
Yeah, that's excellent. Earlier, you spoke about it being public money, which you're investing. Naturally, within SRO, there's an expectation on delivering an outcome.
That's right.
Whether it's efficiencies in processes and procedures, or a reduction in time spent handling things. What does the path look like ahead for recognizing that, for understanding and I guess sort of validating the steps that you've taken? Have you mapped that out Is that something you'll do as the program evolves? What does it look like?
Yeah. So a key part, so there's sort of two elements to realizing that value for money, right? The first one we've spoken a bit about, which is investing and making it easier for people to understand their liabilities and pay them. So that's the doing part. The changes you make based on feedback, and of course, becoming more customer centric as an organization. The other part of realizing that value is to expand your program. Make sure you're focused on expanding the program and the listing posts out across the organization. It's really difficult. I just say expand and go for it. It's actually incredibly hard because each time you put a listing post in place, especially if it's one that continuously gathers information, you're dealing with technical aspects, the data, privacy, how all of that works, and the time and money. But in order to make the most of the time you have and the money that you're spending, it's really essential that you have it mapped out where the listing post should go, how does that align to your business priorities, and what the next 2 years looks like, so that you are constantly pushing it forward. At the moment, most customer satisfaction in the public sector is based on smaller or call-based surveys, which is obviously just one channel. The real value in understanding satisfaction in a holistic way is to get into areas of the business where you don't think you would normally be, get out of customer service, go into some of the corners of your business, and that's where you really start to get a return on your investment.
Yeah, amazing. You may have answered my next question because you talked a lot about expansion, but what's next for SRO and your Voice of Customer program? Where are things headed?
Yeah, look, so what's next is to go into specific revenue lines. Think of it as, departments or branches of a business, and actually speak to customers who are specifically doing this one thing or accessing this one government service. It's pretty rare, starting out in a contact center where you just dealing with everyone is a very common place to start.
Yeah.
What's next for us over the next 2 years is to launch these listing posts in specific areas for specific customers. Lots of opportunity to do that because each service, like for us, we have these major revenue lines, have customers that do very specific things at certain things of the year. Like a payroll tax customer might every month log on to do their reconciliation, or once a year. Land tax customers get a notice and assessment at a certain time. So by narrowing your focus and getting into these customers, you can provide a lot of value for the business and for those customers specifically. The aim we've always had is to roll out surveys continuously in the first 3 years of the program, and to try and make sure that at least a good portion of those surveys are the more difficult kind, which what I mean by that is the ones that are ongoing. So, the contact center is an example of that. A once-off survey would be us just sending a survey to a group of people once.
Yep.
It is more difficult to do those ongoing, so we've set ourselves a target of getting those across the line in these next few years.
Yeah, nice. That's very exciting. Desmond, we've used our half an hour. It's felt like 5 minutes, but it's been really interesting.
Yeah.
So look, on behalf of the team at In Moment, thank you so much for coming along, sharing your story, your journey with SRO over the last 2.5 years, and huge congrats on what you've achieved, and good luck with the program over the next few years. And let's hope we can come back and do another XI Cafe session in 12 months and hear how things are progressing. But for that, thank you. For those that have joined, thanks for joining, and we do hope to see you again on another session of XI Cafe coming up real soon. So Desmond, thanks very much, and have an awesome day.
Thanks, Scott. Bye-bye.